There is both the death and life of great American cities, and maybe that is the most apt title. I am wholly pessimistic about American society. I believe that The Wire is a show about the end of the American Empire. I believe we were all, or our kids are going to live that event. And how we end up at the end of it, and where we end up, and whether or not we can survive and on what terms is going to be the open question from now on. But having said that, there will be cities. We are an urban people. The world is increasingly an urban place. And what kind of places they will be are wholly dependent on how we behave to each other and how our political infrastructure behaves in regards to all of us. Here's the great conceit of The Wire, and I think it's the great question that is in front of the entire world. I mean, the third world has encountered this long before we did, and increasingly we're finding third world conditions in some of our major cities. And here's the reason why. Every single moment on this planet from here on out, human beings are worth less. Not more, less. We are in the post-industrial age. We do not need as many of us as we once did. We don't need us to generate capital. We don't need us to secure wealth. We are in a transitive period where human beings have lost some of their value. Now, whether or not we as a nation or as a city or as a global community can figure out a way to validate the humanity of the individual while at the same time accepting that our need to exploit that individual is less and less, I don't know. I have grave doubts. And since we began somewhere in the middle of the century as the most affluent and powerful nation on earth, and we've not figured out the answers to these questions, I have doubts whether anybody's going to be able to do it. Certainly there's some societies in Europe that have become a little bit more attentive to their most vulnerable populations, certainly more than us. But that is what we've been arguing about in the Wire. And anyone who thought they were watching a cop show and couldn't understand why the cops didn't catch the bad guys at the end and make everybody happy, there's your answer. On The Wire, knowledgeable police officers, the political individuals who begin with some form of sincerity and move on from there, longshoremen who knew their jobs and their world, and by extension people in the industrial world who once made stuff in this country and sold it to other people. Corner boys who sell drugs and are utterly expendable in West and East Baltimore. All these people, their lives are less and less necessary. They are more and more expendable. The institutions in which they serve or are served by, or are supposed to be served by, are indifferent, are more and more indifferent to their existence. I came from a newspaper, one of the better newspapers in the country, where I got to learn my trade. There are 300 people in that newsroom where there used to be 450. And they are providing less news coverage about our city. They're attendant to government less than they ever were. Their buying power has been denied. Their medical has been cut. Knowledgeable reporters. We don't need as many to fill the stuff around the comics and the ads as we once did. And we can take the wires. You name me an institution in American society, I'll show you where they basically betrayed the people they're supposed to serve or be served by. And I didn't start as a cynic. I have to say, I expected a lot more of the future 20 years ago. But at every given moment where this country has had a choice, and even on a local level, this country, its corporations, its institutions, its government, its social framework has had a choice to exalt the value of individuals over the value of the share price. We have chosen raw, unencumbered capitalism. Capitalism has become our God. And the fact that it is, and I accept that it is the only viable way to generate wealth on a large scale. I'm not arguing, you're not looking at a Marxist out here. But you are looking at somebody that doesn't believe that capitalism, absent a social framework that accepts that it is relatively easy to marginalize more and more people in this economy, in this post-industrial economy, every day, and that has to be attended to, and that has to be a conscious calculation on the part of society, that is going to succeed. It's not going to succeed. You're eventually going to have the gated communities and the people inside saying, it is a shame you can't drive downtown anymore. That's where we're headed. And increasingly, the gated communities are going to be further and further away from the maelstrom of our inner cities, and they're going to be better and better protected. And technology is going to be employed to utilize this idea of separate Americas. I live in one Baltimore. The Baltimore I write about, and the Baltimore you see on the wire, is a completely different Baltimore. They both exist. I think we're actually capturing the one with great accuracy, and yet it has no relation to where I live, and no relation to the world in which I inhabit. And it's incredible that it's only blocks apart. But eventually, I think America is going to become more like that. And at some point, either more of us are going to find our conscience or we're not. And there's no reason to think that we are at this point. I mean, we can't even agree to raise the minimum wage after 10 years, unless we give a tax break to businesses. I mean, it's remarkable. I see that, and the part of me that wonders whether we'll still have material to write about 5 years from now, he's warm all over. That is the America that I've come to regard as almost metronomic in its ability to choose to make the wrong choice every time on behalf of its own people. And the city is basically the victim of that in every sense. These imperatives, globalization, the death of union work, the death of the union wage, an unenforceable drug prohibition, these politics of division and of disregard for individual dignity, they don't come from the city. They don't come from the city council or the mayor or the Greater Baltimore Committee or the A.S. Abel Foundation. They're not. It's out of our control, and it's even out of our control in a democratic sense, because everybody in here who might hear my words and agree with me, 5 or 6 of you, if you're going to go out at the next election and say, I'm voting the way Simon says, your vote doesn't matter. You live in Maryland. Your vote doesn't matter. If you thought you were living in a democracy, if you bought into that, you got to go to the dictionary. You got to look up the word oligarchy, and you got to really think about what it means, because we live in a country where 60% of the representation in our highest governing body, the Senate, represents 40% of the population. That's the way our Constitution has it. Okay.